You know, it's been a while since I made a Fire Mage guide. Let's fix that. Alright, let's start with a quick introduction. My name is Preheat, I'm the Wowhead guide writer for Fire Mage and Devastation Evoker. Today's video is going to be covering the basics, so we'll have you covered regardless of if you're new to Mage or if you've been playing it since Shadowlands. We're going to be covering all the essentials such as talents, gear, stats, trinkets, consumables, current tier bonuses in 10.0.7 that hopefully you already have, tier bonuses in 10.1 that hopefully you'll get, cooldowns, and the rotation with gameplay examples for single target and AoE. We have a lot to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started. Oh, also just a standard disclaimer, I'm making this video before patch 10.1, so there's definitely a chance that things change. Alright, so to start things off, let's talk about the new talent system in Dragonflight. The idea is that they allow for more experimentation, right? Having more options, being able to kind of pad through the tree however you want, and giving you that freedom. That being said, the only real changes you make are to the utility talents over here on the left side on the mage tree. So that's going to be stuff like picking up spell steal, maybe picking up remove curse if you need to be able to, remove curses. Also, Dragon's Breath, very, very good in Mythic Plus, obviously. Stuff like Blast Wave, also very useful. But the big thing is just that you pick up the throughput talents. So that's going to be stuff like Overflowing Energy, Rune of Power, Shifting Power, and also Temporal Warp. In addition to the tome talents. If you have those, you pretty much have everything covered, and then everything else is kind of up to you. Also notice that we have a new talent here that, well, it's actually not new. Some people probably recognize it if you played Frost or if you played Mage maybe previously, but we have Ice Flows versus Shimmer. This is actually a choice node right here in the middle. And I'm going to let you know right now, even if you are very familiar with Shimmer and this is kind of your cozy option or go-to, you're going to probably want to get good at using Ice Flows. Ice Flows is an essential talent for every Fire Mage, and there definitely are situations where you might opt for Shimmer just because you need the movement, right? Such as Mythic Razageth. But I'd say in general, Ice Flows is probably the more correct answer between these two. Alright, and moving on, let's talk about the Fire Mage spec tree. So the first thing you're probably going to notice is that you're missing Flame Strike. If you've been playing in Shadowlands, you probably had the spell before and now you're wondering where it went. We don't pick Flame Strike at all. We use just our ignites off the main target. Those build on the main target and then are spread through Fire Blast or Phoenix Flame casts. And that's going to do all the AoE we would ever need. So this is pretty much the build you run in every situation. You don't really change it at all. In fact, the only talent on this entire thing that you would ever really consider changing is Cauterize. And that is simply if you want to get rid of your cheat death for slightly more damage, you drop Cauterize just like so, and you picked up Call of the Sun King instead. And the reason why Call of the Sun King is actually a damage increase is because of From the Ashes. So From the Ashes just gives us a passive amount of mastery for every Phoenix Flame we have off cooldown, which basically creates an incentive for us to not cast Phoenix Flame. As funny as it is, this talent makes it so that we just want to hold on to our Phoenix Flame and hoard them for mastery increases. And obviously we still use Phoenix Flame under certain conditions, especially once we have our new tier bonus in 10.1, but for the most part, we kind of just want to sit on those Phoenix Flames so that we can get as much mastery out of it as possible. The other talent that kind of defines how Fire Mage plays in Dragonflight is Sun King's Blessing. Sun King's Blessing makes it so that after we consume 8 hot streaks, we gain a combustion buff if we hard cast a Power Blast. This is the returning legendary from Shadowlands, so if you play then, you probably recognize it. And this is pretty much why we want to also be running Ice Flows, and it pairs really, really well with Pyroclasm as well. I'd say that Fire Mage's playstyle is kind of defined by this talent, so if you don't really like the playstyle of hard casting Power Blast, and I wouldn't blame you, this is probably not the spec for you. But regardless, we obviously love Sun King's Blessing because it gives us a lot of combustion uptime, and the more combustion uptime we have, the more Sun King's Blessing procs that we're able to generate, right? Because obviously those come from hot streaks, and hot streaks are from combustion primarily. So there's kind of a feedback loop here because more combustion uptime means more Sun King's Blessing stacks, and more Sun King's Blessing stacks means more combustion uptime. The only other thing I should really talk about here that's different from previous expansions is that the talent for Temporal Warp, even though this has been like a legendary in the past, this actually works a lot different than it used to because now you're actually able to stack your Lust buff with your own Lust. So if you use Time Warp on the pull and then you immediately click Time Warp again, you'll actually gain 2 different haste buffs. One is called Time Warp, one is called Temporal Warp, and they both will give you 30% haste for 40 seconds. This is very, very important for Fire Mage, and we'll be talking about this more whenever we get to the rotation and the gameplay examples. Also, a quick note on the talents. So once we actually get the new tier gear in 10.1, we actually have access to Tempered Flames and also Alexstrasza's Fury as talent options that are actually viable. I'm not going to talk about this too much because I want to stay focused on 10.0.7 for the time being, and then we'll save this for like the rotational portion. But just be aware that once you get the new tier in 10.1, that your options when it comes to talents actually do open up. Alright, so next up is gear, and to talk about gear we have to first talk about stats. As a Fire Mage, your primary stat is going to be Intelligence, which is basically what increases your spell damage. Everything that you have that is made for a Fire Mage is going to have this stat on it, except for jewelry and some other special items like trinkets. But typically you don't really have to worry about Intelligence, it just kind of comes with the gear, depending on the item level. And then you also have your secondary stats, which are Haste, Mastery, Versatility, and Crit in that order. Haste is obviously your best stat. You want to stack as much haste as possible in addition to Mastery. And then the other two are just kind of whatever. You don't really care too much about Versatility, and you do not want Critical Strike. So typically your stats, since you only have really 2 slots for secondary stats on your gear, it's going to be Haste Mastery, right? You just want to have every single piece with just Haste Mastery on it, and you'll probably be good to go as long as you have those two. There are some exceptions though, like the Engineering Bracers have only 1 stat on them. Obviously go Haste in this case, right? But aside from that, it's just pretty much whatever you can fit into your gear. There are some other special items as well. So the Elemental Lariat is probably an item that you've heard about. This is an embellished item, which basically means it has a very small effect on it that gives you like a, anywhere from like a 1% to a 0.5% DPS increase. Very, very minimal, but still best in slot, right? So obviously should be mentioned. Also, there is another item that people like when it comes to embellishments. It is the shoulder pads. I think they're called the Amiss of the Blue. These are the shoulder pads right here. So this has just a small damage proc effect where it does arcane damage. Nothing really too crazy, right? But obviously it's better than nothing. And the stats on it aren't too great because it has critical strike, but the effect makes up for it. When it comes to trinkets, in 10.0.7, you're going to want to go with the Furious Rage Feather and the Whispering Incarnate Icon. Those are going to be your best two. Obviously, getting the Whispering Incarnate Icon is not exactly easy because it is a very rare item, but there is a trick to it. If you only kill the first 2 bosses every week and you don't pollute your Mythic with any other kills, it will force the loot table to only pull from these 7 items whenever it generates your first item in your cache, which greatly increases your chance of getting this trinket. So just a little tip for you, don't kill any bosses on Mythic until you find this thing. You can kill as many as you want on Heroic and lower, that's totally fine. Just make sure you're only clearing 2 of 8 Mythic every week and only the same bosses. And then whenever it comes to the other ones, right, obviously we have a lot of other trinkets to choose from. Invoker's Codex is one, Horn of Valor, the Voidminder Shadow Gem, Chill Globe. These are all like fairly good trinkets, but they also will be replaced in the patch. When it comes to new trinkets, there are a lot of options, but we don't really fully know where they're going to land, right? Because a lot of them are probably going to be tuned quite a bit. This one seems like it's going to be probably our best in slot though, the Idol of Chaotic Arrogance. This is a crit trinket, which is obviously not great for us, right? But it does have the effect where we just get 3,300 intellect with a proc. And it turns out that Phoenix Flame actually counts as an area of effect spell. So we will be proccing this quite often. There are some other really neat ones, such as the Beacon to the Beyond. This one's such a cool trinket. I love trinkets that have just an effect where you just pop something really, really hard with it, right? But this thing only really scales with crit and versatility, and since crit and verse are our worst stats as Fire Mage, it's probably not likely that we actually want this trinket. Also, it doesn't work with Combustion, right? So any dreams about using Combustion and making this auto crit are just not going to pan out. Other trinkets too, like the Seething Black Dragon Scale. This one's actually quite good. It isn't crit strike, it's actually haste. I don't know why the tooltip is wrong. But yeah, it's okay. And then obviously we have some other trinkets that just aren't really fully implemented yet, so we can only speculate at this point. But I'm sure that once we actually have the patch, stuff like the Time Breaching Talon, Iridus Fragment, Spoils of Neltharius, I'm sure these are going to be fairly good trinkets because they seem to be pretty good at 372, right? And obviously we'll be able to get them all the way up to 421 in the patch. For more information on this, check the description below for my Wowhead guide link and also the Subcreation for Fire Mage and the Bloodmallet for stats. This stuff automatically updates, so it's going to be the best, most up-to-date place to find out whatever is going to be best for you to use. Alright, so when it comes to enhancements and consumables, you can find a full list on my Wowhead. I'm just going to give you a quick list, right? We're just going to fly through this as fast as we can. So obviously you have sockets on your gear. Make sure to plug those holes with your Illuminated Diamond. You can only have one of those. And the rest put in these Keen Simrolds. That's a made-up word. Hopefully I said it right. It's going to be high haste, low mastery on that thing. Also enchant your pants with Frozen Spell Thread. Put the Sophic Devotion on your weapon. Also have Waking stats on your chest and Devotion of Haste on your rings. For tertiary stats, you can also have Devotion of Avoidance, Graceful Avoidance. Both of these are just going to decrease your damage taken, so make sure you enchant your bracers and your cloak with those. And also put Plains Runner Breeze on your boots so that you run faster. And then there's also a new weapon enchant coming in 10.1, and I have no idea how this works because it's not implemented yet, but it's called Shadow Flame Wraith. I'm going to assume this works like the Relaxing Ruby, where it does like a big AoE pop, but we'll have to wait and see how it actually pans out. So keep your eye open for this enchantment. And then when it comes to consumables, in theory, Static Empowerment and Charge Isolation would be the best, but in practice, just go with Trepid Versatility. This is just like the best all-around file. It also makes you take less damage, and it also is really cheap, right? So it's just like really great all around. Do not, whatever you do, do not get the Iced File of Corrupting Rage. This is terrible. It gives you crit. You don't want crit. It also makes you take damage. You don't want to take damage. Just avoid it. Okay. And then when it comes to potions, obviously the Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power is great if you're rich, right? And if you're not rich, then you can always get the off-brand version, which is the Elemental Potion of Power. No shame in that, obviously, but if you want to, you know, seem like you got a Gucci belt on, make sure that you're using Elemental Potions of Ultimate Power every pull. And then whenever it comes to food buffs, I recommend the Devilishly Deviled Eggs. This is a new recipe that came in 10.0.7. You can just buy them on the auction house. They're super cheap. Also, refreshing healing potions are just great all around, so just always have these in your bag. It's good to get in the habit of just using them whenever you're about to die. And obviously in Raid, you want to be a little bit more careful with how you use them, but they're just all around great, especially for a class that doesn't really have a direct way to heal itself without cooldowns. All right, just a heads up, this next part is going to be super basic, so if you already understand this part, go ahead and skip forward to the next chapter where we talk about how to actually play and use your rotation. All right, let's go ahead and talk about mage abilities, and I'm not going to talk about each and every ability individually just because it would take too much time to cover, but if you want more information on the abilities themselves, you can always check out my Wowhead guide. You can also just place your cursor over the ability in your spellbook, and it'll show you a tooltip, giving you an idea of what the ability does. But first up is Arcane Intellect. This just gives us Intellect, 5% of it, and it also is a raid buff, so anyone in the raid is going to receive this benefit, which is really nice. Next up is Blazing Barrier. So if you press this button, you get a 20% absorb shield over your health. Next up is Blink. Blink just teleports us forward and breaks us out of stuns, and it also gets rid of roots. And also there are talents that modify Blink, right? So you can pick up a talent that basically converts it into another ability that is off the GCD called Shimmer. You can actually cast while you're casting as well. GCD is a term that refers to global cooldown. So basically if you press an ability and you notice like on your bar that you're not able to press another ability while that ability is like recovering, basically everything's recovering at the same time here. That is what is called the global cooldown. And there are some abilities that are off the GCD, right? Such as your counterspell, which interrupts targets. So if you use a GCD and you press counterspell, it's still going to work, right? You can still interrupt while you're on the GCD. But obviously if you're casting a spell, right? So like, let's say you're in the middle of a cast and you try to counterspell, that's not going to work. You have to interrupt your cast and then cast counterspell. Next up is Ice Block. Ice Block is going to make us immune to damage. It will also clear any debuffs we have. Basically, while we're in our Ice Block, under normal circumstances, we can't die. It's also going to make it so we cannot move, right? We're frozen in place, which can be also a nice little benefit, right? So if you are moving really quickly, like let's say you just got flung off a platform or something like that, or you're falling to your death, if you use Ice Block, it'll actually allow you to stop your momentum, right? And that way you'll just fall kind of like an anvil, but you'll be immune to damage while that's all happening. Next up is Mirror Image. So if you press Mirror Image, you summon your homies, right? And while they're out, you're going to take less damage. Also, what's really cool about this ability is while you have it out, your enemies are kind of confused by it, so you don't really generate threat like you normally would. All right, let's go ahead and talk about damaging abilities now. So first up is Fireball. Basically, you shoot out a little fireball. It deals a small amount of damage, but that's not the real reason we actually use it. We like Fireball because it has the ability to crit. You don't need to worry about crit as a stat, obviously. We already mentioned that before when we went over stats, but we do care a lot about critting. So one crit is going to give us Heating Up. Heating Up is basically the first stage of Hot Streak, right? So if something is heating up, it allows us to then convert it into a Hot Streak if we get a second crit. And the reason why we want to generate Hot Streak is because it allows us to instant cast our next ability, Pyroblast. We want to use Pyroblast as an instant cast, right? So whenever we have a Hot Streak, we're actually able to just cast Pyroblast instantly, just like so. And that's what the Fire Mage rotation is all about. It's about converting heating ups into Hot Streaks and then using those Hot Streaks as instant cast Pyroblast. And how we convert these abilities into Hot Streaks typically is by getting a crit and then using this ability Fire Blast. Fire Blast is just instant. It's off the GCD. You can cast it while casting, right? You just press it. It deals damage and it's going to always crit. So that way you can just convert it, your heating up into a Hot Streak automatically with it. Very nice for that, right? And then we also have Phoenix Flame. So Phoenix Flame is a really cool spell. It shoots out like this Phoenix, right? Typically, we want to hold on to our Phoenix Flames, though. We don't really want to use them if we have this talent from the Ashes. But of course, there's also Alexstrasza's Fury, which makes it so that our Phoenix Flames always crit. And that talent obviously has an added incentive for Phoenix Flame. We don't really play that yet, but we will in 10.1, or at least we have the option to, once we unlock our new tier gear. Next up is Scorch. So Scorch is just a cast that has no travel time. It just instantly hits the enemy. It's very, very low in damage, has a low crit chance. But the reason why we like Scorch is because in Execute, right? So whenever an enemy's health gets lower, below 30%, then Scorch is a guaranteed critical strike and it deals increased damage. Okay, so outside of cooldowns, basically, the whole idea of the rotation is you're trying to cast fireballs to get heating up, right? And then once we get those hot streak converted, then we are able to cast them. So as you can see, the rotation looks something kind of like this typically. Now, I'm not going to react to any of these buffs because I haven't explained them yet. But basically, you can see here the instant cast Power Blasts are going off. They're dealing damage, right? And I can just continue to attack this target dummy. The reason why I'm critting every hit, by the way, is because of this talent right here, Firestarter. Whenever a target is above 90% health, you're going to always crit. All right, next up is cooldowns. So for cooldowns, the first thing we should talk about is Rune of Power. So Rune of Power just places a rune on the ground right under your feet. And while you're in that rune, you're going to have increased damage, right? So this is going to increase our damage by 40%. It lasts around 12 seconds. And whenever we pop our main cooldown, Combustion, which we haven't talked about yet, we will also get Rune of Power on the ground there too. So standing in your Rune of Power is great. Make sure that you are not leaving your Rune of Power unless you absolutely have to. The next cooldown we should talk about is Shifting Power. Shifting Power is an ability that deals AoE damage in a radius around you. It's a channeled ability and you cannot move while you do it. You got to stand still. But every single one of those pulses is going to give you cooldown reduction and also has just a really nice visual to it, right? And it deals decent AoE damage too. Think of Shifting Power as kind of a way to reload your Fire Blast charges, right? Because as we were talking about before, Fire Blast, which is instant off the GCD and can be cast while casting, has 3 charges. It also makes our spells that are on cooldown faster, right? So obviously having like Rune of Power or Combustion on cooldown whenever you use Shifting Power is very beneficial because it's going to make that stuff come up faster. All right, and now the last and most important cooldown of all is Combustion. You press the button and your character becomes on fire. Everything that you do while you're in Combustion is going to crit, right? So Combustion is just 100% crit. It also drops a Rune of Power under us automatically so that you don't have to cast Rune of Power before you go into Combustion, right? And there's a couple different ways you can go into Combustion. Obviously, you can just press the button. We also have Sun King's Blessing, as we've mentioned before. Whenever we use 8 hot streaks and then we hard cast a Pyroblast, this is going to give us 6 seconds of Combustion. And this one is not going to drop a Rune of Power, just to be clear. The Fire Mage rotation itself basically has 4 phases to it. So you start off with Firestarter, right? And that's basically everything that happens above 90% health. This is just everything you do on the open air before your first Combustion. And then you have your Combustion phase where you're actually dealing damage with Combustion, right? You're in your cooldowns. And obviously you're carrying SKBs as much as you can, right? And then outside of that, you have your normal rotation, which is what you do outside of Combustion and SKB, whenever you're just buying time between cooldowns. And then the last portion is going to be Searing Touch, and that's whenever the target is below 30% health. And basically in Searing Touch, all you do is you just swap out your Fireball for Scorch. That's really it. The opener itself can be broken down with the following graphic, and if you need to, go ahead and pause if you want to review this portion. But you'll also notice that the timeline is also showing the spells in order as well. Alright, so we're going to show the sequence for the opener at half speed. So you hardcast your Pyroblast into a Rune of Power, Double Lust, Potion, and also Fire Blast. Right, everything crits because we're in Firestarter, so we use Pyroblast, 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 into Shifting Power, into Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast. And then we're going to cast a Fireball here. And we're trying to maintain Field of Burn, right? That's our talent. Whenever we use Fire Blast, it gives us this little buff, so we're keeping us at 3 stacks. We hardcast SKB at the very end, we Combustion and Fire Blast, and then we start throwing out Pyroblast. And the order here, the priority is Fire Blast is number 1. Number 2 is going to be Pyroclasm. Number 3 is going to be Phoenix Flames if you have less than 10 seconds worth of Combustion left. Number 4 is going to be Fireball if you have over 100% haste, which we do have over 100% haste here. And then obviously less is going to be Scorch, right? But yeah, it's all just about using your Fire Blast. Basically just use everything on cooldown as much as you can, right? And obviously use those Pyroclasm procs too, but try to save one if you're about to get an SKB, Sun King's Blessing soon. And then as you can see here, Rune of Power is coming out very, very soon here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the last bit of juice out of our combustion here, right? We're going to drop Rune of Power, and we're going to start hard casting this Pyroblast. At the very end, we re-up the Field of Burn, right? And then we start throwing out the Pyroblast again. The name of the game here is we always want to be queuing a Pyroblast with a hard cast, right? So if you're ever hard casting a spell, whether it be Fireball, Pyroblast, whatever it is, right? You want to make sure that you're ready to instant cast as you come out of it. That way you don't delay. All right, and that is the opener. I know this is pretty technical and it takes definitely a lot of memorization, but you know, there is logic to it, right? And just remember that the beginning sequence before you actually get to Combustion, that part is set in stone, but then the rest of it is kind of just a priority system. And if you want more information, maybe like in a written form, right, on this, you can always go check out my guide on Wowhead where I have this all broken down, right? So here's the sequence for the opener before you get to Combustion, and then here's what happens once you're in Combustion. And then obviously we have more information on what to do outside of Combustion. This is all on Wowhead. The link will be in the description below. I know it's very complicated, but it's something that you just have to practice, right? That's the only way you'll really get it down. Outside of cooldowns, we're pretty much just biding our time and just trying to set for the next set. So you just try to get your SKB ready. Obviously also use Shifting Power on cooldown, right? And you try to use Rune of Power leading into SKB whenever you have that available and Combustion isn't coming up soon. Also, whenever you use Shifting Power, make sure that you have all your Fire Blasts on cooldown first, right? Very important. But yeah, so like in this case, right? Rune of Power is coming up, so I just get a Fire Blast ready. I cast Rune of Power, and then I'm going to begin casting this SKB, Fire Blast at the very end, and then just do kind of like a little mini Combustion here. Same logic as before, right? Yeah, that'll lead me straight into my next Combustion, like my real Combustion here. And then we have SKB available with Pyroclasm, keeping that Field of Burn upright. And obviously, since we don't have so much lust, we'll be just using like Scorch and, you know, Phoenix Flame as we end up at the very end of this Combustion here. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the idea. It's much slower whenever you're no longer in your cooldowns. And be really careful there. You saw that I just refreshed my Field of Burn just like slightly too late, and it ended up falling off during Combustion. That's really bad. You don't want that to happen. But yeah, basically just to recap, right? You do your Fire Starter, you do Combustion, and then outside of that, you're just kind of fishing for more SKBs. You're using Pyroclasms as they come up. And then in Execute, you obviously want to be using Scorch instead. And then be more careful about using your Fire Blast, right? Because you always want to kind of go into Combustion with some Fire Blasts available. Be careful about doing that whenever you're in Execute, just because in Execute, it's obviously a little bit easier, right? Since you're going to have guaranteed hot streaks, so kind of save your Fire Blast then. And then outside of that, just try to use your Shifting Power on cooldown, as long as your Rune of Power is on cooldown Combustion too. I mean, you should pretty much just use it like as soon as you get rid of your Fire Blast, generally speaking. And obviously use your Bloodlust again as a personal cooldown whenever it's up. And yeah, I mean, that's it, right? It's more complicated than it seems just because the opener is kind of technical, but once you get the opener down, it's not too bad. Also, one thing that's really nice is the rotation is basically the same in AoE, except for you also can use Dragon's Breath and Ice Nova as well. So, I mean, AoE is all just about spreading your Ignite Cleave, right? And best way to get Ignite is just to do your single target rotation. Just try and pick a target that has a lot of health, right? You obviously don't want your target to die while you're attacking it. That would be tragic because you would lose your Ignite. So remember, whenever you're actually inside of Combustion, everything crits. So you're just alternating casts, right? So basically, the whole goal is to cast as many Hot Streak Pyroblasts as possible. And you're alternating your other cast in between those, right? So that's going to be Fire Blast, that's going to be Fireballs, that's going to be Pyroblast Hardcast whenever you have those. And then obviously, as Combustion is nearing its end, you can also use Phoenix Flame, but it's all just about carrying as much of that Combustion time as possible. Every SKB you get during Combustion is going to extend it, and you're also going to be casting your Rune of Power during Combustion so long as you have at least 6 seconds left of Combustion. Obviously, if you have SKB available, it's also good to go ahead and place that rune, and then you can just do another SKB. You want to line up your Rune of Powers as much as possible with the SKB so that you can then have the buffs overlap. So essentially, you're using everything on cooldown, but you're trying to bank it enough so that you have your Fire Blast and your other important procs for Combustion. And you're also trying to have a certain tempo with it, right? Because if you look, Field of Burn is kind of like what decides the tempo. And you always want to re-up Field of Burn kind of towards the end here. You can see how I'm waiting till the very end to press Fire Blast, right? Because I want to make sure that I'm keeping that buff up. Maintaining Field of Burn is very important, right? And then you're also trying to make sure that you have your procs up whenever you're actually getting your cast off, and sometimes you want to hold on to those procs for a little bit longer because it might line up better with SKB, such as in this case I just did it with Pyroclasm. And you're just trying to make sure that you make good use of your other cooldowns like Rune of Power and stuff like that. Because of how Feel the Burn kind of determines the tempo that you play Fire Mage, a lot of people consider this class to feel almost like a rhythm game. So definitely think of it that way if you're having trouble with it. And also just remember, right, always be casting. If you're casting a spell, then at least you're doing some damage. It may not be the right spell, but it's going to be doing more damage than if you're just running around or idling or just, you know, not pressing Scorch on the move or something like that. Okay, and I've saved tier bonuses for last because I also kind of want to talk about the rotation in 10.1 at this point. I feel like this is a good moment to kind of give a disclaimer as well. So for 10.1, I do have a sample sequence in here, a couple of them actually, if you want to see the rotation, kind of like how I broke down the rotation earlier. Just really want to drive that point home that this is still very early, right? I'm making this before 10.1. It's very likely something changes. You can play Tempered Flame if you want. You can play Improved Combustion. You can play From the Ashes. You can play Alexstrasza's Fury. This is all what the new tier bonus gives us. So as it is right now, it seems like doing 2 SKBs into your first combustion is the way to go. But obviously that's not going to be realistic on every fight, right? Like not every fight is going to let you just, you know, cast for like 20 seconds before you go into your cooldowns. And that's going to make your cooldowns really long, right? So it could be very disruptive if there's mechanics and stuff happening. But anyways, I just want to give that as my last disclaimer, and let's go ahead and talk tier bonuses now. The tier bonus in 10.0 is the Bindings of the Crystal Scholar. This is just a flat damage increase, right? So nothing too special about it, but it's definitely not too bad. And then in 10.1, we have a new set bonus called the Underlight Conjurer's Brilliance. And this basically makes it so whenever we apply Phoenix Flame to our targets, we get this nice little debuff that makes them take additional damage. So if you remember from before, we had a talent called From the Ashes. This talent basically makes it so that there's an incentive for us to not use Phoenix Flame because we want to save our mastery, and using Phoenix Flame decreases our mastery, but the set bonus gives us an incentive to actually use Phoenix Flame. Also, once we apply the Phoenix Flame debuff to the target, if we hit them, the 4-piece is going to give us Calcification, which at 20 stacks gives us 2 free charges of Phoenix Flame that deal 200% increased damage. So how strong is the tier bonus? Well, it's way too early to say definitively how strong this bonus is. However, we have some initial sims that are showing it to be around a 14% increase, which actually makes it quite strong. Probably the best thing about this tier bonus, though, is that it allows for different talent choices that we don't normally have access to, right? Because they just aren't competitive. And these talent choices are actually bringing life to a spec that has otherwise been very stale for most of the last expansion and also this expansion so far. So that's going to be talents like Alexstrasza's Fury, Tempered Flames, also Flame Accelerant, perhaps. And whenever it comes to the actual playstyle, it's very different than what you might expect. I'm going to go ahead and show you what this looks like on the PTR right now. And keep in mind, this is still very early, right? Obviously, this could change a lot, but just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, this is what it looks like if you use Alexstrasza's Fury and Tempered Flames with the 10.1 tier bonus in your opener. I'm going to go ahead and let this one play out. So just to show another example, right, in the opener, you're going to precast your Pyroblast, which is obviously a much faster cast since you have Tempered Flames. And then you're going to double Lust, use your potion, immediately use Phoenix Flame into Rune of Power, into Pyroblast, and then you're going to use Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Shifting Power, Fireblast, Pyroblast, Dragon's Breath, Pyroblast, Phoenix Flame, Pyroblast, and then from there, you're going to go straight into your SKB, and then you're going to play out your SKB like you normally play it out, and then on your second SKB, that's when you actually activate Combustion right here. So as you can see, we just activated Combustion, right? And keep in mind, we have over 100% haste here, so we are actually hard casting Fireballs in Combustion if we don't have other good options. And yeah, obviously you have a lot of Phoenix Flames, right? The Phoenix Flame damage is quite high as well because the Phoenix Flame has 200% increased damage with the tier bonus. And as you can see, as we close out here, we have a Rune of Power down and we have an SKB currently procced, so we are ready to continue the burn. All right, and with that, I'm gonna go ahead and tap out of this video. If you do like this video, I really hope that you press that like button. Fucking smash it if you have to. If you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe as well. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I like to do every once in a while, right? And it's a lot of work. But anyways, it's 3:40 a.m. I'm gonna get some sleep. Hit the sub button. Just do it. It's like 60% of y'all who watch my videos don't even subscribe to my videos. it's time. If you made it to the end of the video, this is your sign. Hit the sub button. Okay. Anyways, that's it. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.